Hello everyone, my name is Gus.
Hi, I'm Woody.
Hi, I'm Ed Sorenson with Cave Adventures.
All right. And today we're filming this episode because about a year ago, there was a death from a cave diver who was doing a solo cave dive at Ginny Springs. And in the process of trying to find out what happened, which we like to discuss when incidents like that happen, although they're terrible, we get to learn from it. There was a lot of discussion about why he died and what happened. And one of the theories is that he had an O2 shutoff valve on his rebreather, and going through a restriction, he managed to by accident shut it off and eventually breathe himself down to hypoxic levels, pass out and drown, basically. That's the theory. Now, we believe that rebreathers are actually safer than open circuit. And when we were talking about this accident, you brought up an interesting point. What was that?
So first of all, the fatality was on a Sidewinder rebreather that we're talking about today. It was the first, and I know a little bit about the Sidewinder. I spent a year diving it before anybody else did, getting it to where it is today. I am Sidewinder instructor number 1. I'm in Sidewinder instructor trainer number 1. I'm Sidewinder instructor trainer examiner number 1. I dove prototype unit 1. I now currently have prototype unit number 2, which I've been diving for over 6 years. And so I have a little bit of knowledge on this.
How many dives on the Sidewinder, you think?
I have no idea. People ask me that all the time, thousands and thousands. I mean, I'm in the water every day. So, and that's the unit I'm on every single day. So
awesome.
But for those of you who don't know PO2, then this is probably not going to make a whole lot of sense to you. But to break it down in the most simplistic form, right now we're breathing air, which is 21% oxygen. So on a PO2 meter, that would be 0.21 or 21%. Partial pressure is partial pressure, which means oxygen percentage down at depth, you have pressure, so it's going to act as if it's more oxygen. So we generally want to run a 1.2 to a 1.3, which would be impossible here because 100% oxygen is as high as you can get, which would be a 1.0, exactly. So we're diving actually more than 100% oxygen when we're at depth. But the theory that some people say, and keep in mind, anytime there's a fatality, a lot of people, it's that morbid curiosity. Everybody wants to know. Everybody all of a sudden becomes junior detective. All right, we leave that actually to detectives. There's people that do that for a living. I've been body recovery diver for 25 years. I've done a lot of them. And we just do, remember the old TV show Dragnet? Just the facts, ma'am. That's what we put, just the facts.
Yeah.
So the fact is, he drowned. The computer gives data that we generally don't have. I know a little bit about it because I know some of the people that were involved, but I don't know everything. So I don't hypothesize. I'm not trying to figure this out. But I've heard what I call nonsensical or silly comments like, if you dive or shut off, you're going to die. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Come on, people, you're smarter than that. Everybody has an opinion, and opinions are good. Everybody gets one. It's a free country. But if my opinion doesn't exactly match with yours, that doesn't make me stupid. There's not one way to do anything. But what we're going to do today is prove just how silly that is, because I have actually done it multiple times where I shut my oxygen off on purpose. One of the skills that we do, as you guys both know, you were both students of mine on the Sidewinder, is we go down to depth and I have you shut the oxygen off. And we're just gonna swim until the PO2 goes down, because we know every time we breathe in, we metabolize some of that oxygen into carbon dioxide. The scrubber canisters scrub out the carbon dioxide. So our PO2 is going to drop each breath. And it's generally 0.04 or 4% oxygen. 0.04% oxygen. So it's not much. But as that oxygen level drops down, as we all know, when it turns to carbon dioxide and the scrubber canister scrubs out the carbon dioxide, each breath is going to have less volume.
That's right.
We're still going to have 100%. A gas always has to be 100%. We've scrubbed out that carbon dioxide, so we now have less volume.
That's right.
So each breath, it's not very noticeable because it's such a small amount. But if you shut it off and nothing else is coming in, because remember, the KISS unit has a leaky valve or a continuous flow orifice, so it's continuously flowing in oxygen that matches that metabolic rate.
That's right.
So we don't run out of gas, and our PO2 doesn't drop. So when we shut it off, either intentionally or accidentally, that volume is going to drop. So when my students were doing their swim just down, and we try and keep it in a very, very safe level of 0.77 or 0.78, which is over three times, almost 4 times the amount of oxygen you're breathing now. So that's definitely not dangerous. But sometimes if they were at minimum loop volume, where the counter lung only had 1 lungful of gas, they will not actually get to that 0.77 before they feel like, I'm not getting a full breath. So one day, I knew this, so one day I'm going to try it out. And before I shut it off, I added some. So I had like a lungful and a half, 1.5 times what I need and what I can hold in my lungs to start. I shut it off, and after over 10 minutes, I had gone from a 1.3 to about a 1.07, maybe a 1.05. So I'm still higher oxygen content than I could be right now if I was breathing pure oxygen.
4 or 5 times. Yeah.
And I was like, and I didn't have a full lungful. I had about 3/4, but I kept going. I just kept, okay, I'll just have shorter breaths. And pretty soon, after about 15 minutes, I didn't have enough to breathe. It was uncomfortable. So for one, if he bumped it off, the victim, or he shut it off intentionally, because I also heard rumors that he was running a needle valve that may have been malfunctioning. But if he shut it off intentionally because that PO2 was climbing, which I think is a more likely thing based on what I do know, and he forgot about it, okay, that could happen. But if his ADV wasn't on, the automatic demand valve that automatically adds gas, diluent gas, as it draws a negative. In other words, he doesn't have enough to breathe, but he tries anyway. Yeah. It's going to add gas. If he had a lower PO2 mix, and I believe his mix at the depth he was at when he was deceased was around a 0.42, 0.45. Okay. Which is still still over double what we need right now and what we have right now. Yep. Almost triple what we need.
Yeah.
So just to get it down to a hypoxic level, I'm guessing with that DIL PO2 and his ADV had to have been on, or he would have had to have added gas himself intentionally and still not checked. Yeah. On the low side, I'm guessing 20 minutes. On the high side, 30 minutes. So anybody that doesn't check their PO2, and every instructor should, and I'm sure yours did, teach you around every 30 seconds to 1 minute. No more than 4 minutes. And you'll see on the video today, we're gonna shoot it. I'm gonna not only shut my oxygen off at depth, but I'm going to have my assistant Medi, he is actually going to unscrew my first stage from my oxygen bottle. So there will be no way somebody can say, oh, well, his shutoff was leaking and he's still getting oxygen. He bypassed. No, we're going to unplug the oxygen bottle. There is nothing.
We're going to take it off. And you're using a modified harness that doesn't even have a wing or anything, so people don't think it's like, oh, they probably...
It's kind of like that cutaway. I want people to be able to see the volume.
Yeah.
Because you'll actually be able to see, and we'll probably have some cards that say, I don't have quite a lung full of gas.
That's good.
I have like 3/4 of a lung full of gas. I really need some gas.
And we're gonna have multiple cameras, everybody. So we'll from the front, the back, so you'll be able to see everything.
And I'm gonna try and stay on it as long as I can.
Yeah.
Before I have to add gas. And obviously I can't add any oxygen because
Right.
it will be unplugged.
Unplugged, yeah.
I'm going to have to add some dough.
Yeah. So bottom line is, to make long story short, we don't think that once you're at depth, you can go hypoxic because you'll run out of breath first.
Exactly.
That's
Whether you bumped it off accidentally or you turned it off intentionally, it doesn't matter.
It blows up. Your O2 blows up. Doesn't matter.
Now,
You
when we
have to
first
breathe.
talked about this, some people were saying that, well, what if you got in the water with your rebreather just had air in it, so 21%, 0.21, and then you didn't turn on your oxygen and you went diving, and you forgot to shut it off or you bumped it off before you went on the dive. Okay, to that I say, nobody can make a rebreather that's idiot proof. So before you got in the water with anybody that does any kind of, even from basic open water class, I know that almost every instructor did, or at least if not should have said, before you get in the water, you should check your regulator. When you plug in your BC or your power inflator to your wing,
sure it works.
you should do at least 2 or 3 shots to make sure it works. If you have a dry suit and you're plugging in your dry suit, you should always check it to make sure it's on and functioning.
That's right.
Before you breathe that regulator, especially if you have a long hose, as in technical divers always do, you would not want to just take a breath. Nope, it works, because you might have just breathed half of that hose full of gas. So you're going to take at least 3 breaths off of each regulator, and technical divers always have 2. So we're going to take 3 breaths off this regulator. We're going to take 3 breaths off this regulator. I'm going to hit this power inflator 2 or 3 times. I'm going to hit this, so I know my gas is on and functioning. Same with a rebreather. Now, the whole pre-breathe a rebreather first, as in to make sure you have a scrubber in it, that's going to be a whole nother episode, we know.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about that later. But the pre-breathe that I teach in my class is that we, for one, when we build the rebreather here on the table before we get to the water, we always finish by doing a positive on pure oxygen instead of blowing into it like most instructors teach. And why is that? Well, one, because we have 100% oxygen in there, we just calibrated it. And by doing the positive there, you have a pressure gauge. You can see that that's reading 1.04 instead of 0.99 or 0.98 that it calibrated to. So we know when we finish that positive, let that oxygen out, we know it's pure oxygen. When it goes to the dive site, all my students have pure oxygen in. So I know all instructors teach their students never get in the water below 0.7. So this way we have a 1 at all times. When we get in the water, we're gonna check to make sure our rebreather, 2 gases, diluent and oxygen, are both on and functioning. Now to do that, we would wanna just take 3 breaths, just like our regulators. 3 simple, that's all it takes. But if we breathe it in through the mouth, out through the nose, like a lot of instructors that I have taught teach their students, and I'm sure a lot of you instructors out there probably do the same as well. By doing it in through the mouth, out through the nose, not letting any gas go by here, we have 100% of my own gas. So when I start with my diluent, because I'm already at oxygen, those 3 breaths, now I've watched my PO2, my numbers, and my sensors go smoothly and evenly down. So that's one added bonus to the same 3 breaths I had to do anyway, so like a free gift. And the second thing is I just reanalyzed my dill as well, and I made sure it was on and functioning, which was the primary. And not only that, but I also did the exact same thing as a dill verification check. So you've practiced that every time you put your rebreather on. Awesome. Now we're down at dill pressure. So we're gonna turn that oxygen on. We're gonna do those same 3 breaths, just like switching to that other regulator, and we're gonna do 3 breaths in through the mouth, out through the nose, watch those sensors go smoothly and evenly up. So we made sure it was on. We got the added benefit of watching the sensors go smoothly and evenly up to know that they're all working the same. and correctly. And we've reanalyzed our oxygen. And we've done the same thing we're going to do at a 20 foot for a 1.6 check. So I know everything is on and functioning when I go in the water. Right. I know my PO2 is where it needs to be. As I'm going down, I can add gas appropriately to keep, and I'm always going to monitor my PO2. At depth changes, you're going to always want to monitor it. If you're at one constant depth, if you want to go 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and you know your machine and you're experienced and you're confident in it, that's fine. But nobody's ever going to go 15, 20, 25, 30 minutes without checking your PO2.
For sure.
When I dive, I'm diving like this. Did you see my eyes move there, kids? That's really difficult. So that's all it takes to make sure my PO2 is where it needs to be. So what other questions do we have before we go in and try this death-defying act? And remember, kids, we're trained professionals. Don't try this at home. That's
right. That's an important thing to mention. We don't want people to just take their Sidewinder and go out there and start doing all kinds of tests. But I don't have any questions. I just want to see the experiment because this is facts. This is what there's no bias. There's no like, well, I think having one is safer or having one is not safer. This is just let's go test it and see. Why you'd run out of air before you go hypoxic.
Right. With everything, when a rebreather comes from the factory, it comes in a certain way. That's right. Anytime you modify it, alter it to do what you want it to do, and everybody has their own opinions. Oh, I want a VOV. I don't want a VOV. I want a heads-up display. I don't want a heads-up display. I want a nerd. I don't want a nerd. I want a shut-off. I don't want a shut-off. I want a manual ad valve. I don't want a manual. Okay, I know what I dive, and I tell people how I do things and why. If my students want to do something completely different, I have no problem with that. We're going to do it the best and safest way possible for them. Yeah. I don't have the opinion that you have to do it my way or you're going to die. That's nonsense. Come on, people. We don't need that kind of stuff. The world is divided enough as it is. I don't ever say, gosh, you're stupid because you think. No.
Right. Woody he made. No,
Woody I do all the time, but that's Woody. So. No, this is like Gus said, this is not anything biased. It is just to prove a point that whether I shut it off intentionally or accidentally, you're going to see how long this takes for that PO2 to change.
That's right.
And that it's impossible from any kind of decent PO2 to go hypoxic without adding gas, whether it's the ADV on or a manual ad valve. It is not possible.
Can you just tell them really fast where we're going to be? We're going to be at what depth?
So when this accident occurred, I believe it's been a long time now. I don't remember, but it was well over 100 feet deep, okay. 110 maybe, around 4 something atmospheres. Okay. We're going to be today around 90 something feet, around 3.5 atmospheres. Okay. It'll be in the ballpark. Yeah. And the main point is to squash the silliness that a shutoff can kill you. That's just nonsensical. People stop that. You know better than that. You're smarter than that. So today we're just going to prove it because I don't want to tell you to go out and try this at home because it's not safe. We're going to have 4 expert divers in the water minimum. There's going to be video cameras on me. I'm taking this risk on my own because it was my idea. But there's going to be lots of sets of eyes on me. I'm really good at watching my PO2. I know when I can breathe and when I can't breathe, and I'll know when it's time to add. And guess what? I'll also have bailout just in case. Exactly. So here we go.
All right, so here's the setup Ed will be using. As you can see, there's only a counter lung and the scrubbers and the O2 tank, but there is no wing. This is completely see-through, so just counter lung, scrubbers, O2, and the loop.
Remember, don't ever touch anyone else's gear or breathing gases underwater. This was set up ahead of time for him to actually take it off so that there was no confusion on, oh, maybe he's getting oxygen somewhere.
So that's what he's doing here, right? Removing the first stage from the tank.
Right.
O2 was turned off already, and Woody is removing the first stage.
So you can see we're at about 13 minutes of dive time, and I'm at a 1.3 ppO2 at that depth of around 90 feet. So, and I started with actually, now I had no wings, so I was slightly overweighted. This harness was my no mount harness, so it was really not set up for me to dive. But I started with about a lung and a half full of gas, so I was well past 1.5 times minimum loop volume where I would normally be. And just so we could go longer. But you'll see, I think at about 8 minutes, I was noticeably below minimum loop volume. By 10 minutes, I could barely breathe. I was probably at just over half loop volume. And at that point, I'm really not getting any actually oxygen transfer out of my lungs because it's short stroking and it's just going in and out of the dead space. So.
And I know that you'll see me touch his lung. So I'm showing that it was virtually totally collapsed at one point.
And we can see that here they are inflating quite nicely. Yeah. That's why I brought the camera close.
Now we keep mentioning loop volume, but a lot of people watching this channel are not divers or rebreather divers for that matter. So can you really quick explain what that is?
Yeah. So just imagine if you had a party balloon and it was flat and small, and then you breathe a normal breath in, and then you blew into that. That's my lung full of gas. So when you pinch that off, that is your loop volume. If you're over that, that is called minimum loop volume. That is exactly one breath. Right. If I go over that, and that counter lung will hold about 3 to 3.5 lungfuls of gas. Yeah. So I could be, with my students, I try and, as you know, push minimum loop volume because it's real easy. When you're going along and you come up a 1.5 feet, that gas is expanding. Now you're over minimum loop volume. So you'll see me from time to time on depth changes, bubbles will come out of my nose or my mouth. Right. I'm venting off that gas. A lot of people run well past minimum loop volume so that when they go down a little and that gas compresses, they don't go and feel like there's not enough gas to breathe.
Makes sense. All right, so we're down to 1.18, 1.14, seems like.
Yes.
And if you see Ed is kicking to keep up with the current, right? And you can see it's blowing stuff past you guys.
The main reason I wanted to keep swimming the entire time was for the metabolism, to simulate an actual swimming against, because it's hard to see on the video, but there's actually a really good flow going through there. So this is considered a high flow cave. So I'm swimming against that current constantly to show, because that's going to be maximum metabolism of the oxygen. If I'm
realistic.
If I'm resting, I'm going to metabolize less oxygen. Right. Your brain and your muscles utilize oxygen metabolized into CO2 and that's the whole point of this, is people say, well, where is that gas volume going? When I breathe out, when I breathe in right now, I'm breathing in 21% or 0.21 ppO2. That's normal air, 21% oxygen. When I breathe out, and I demonstrate this in my rebreather class, I'll breathe out over a sensor and it'll drop to 0.17. And that will still sustain life, otherwise CPR, mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, wouldn't work.
Right.
But, so when I metabolize that 0.04%, it turned it into carbon dioxide. So the scrubber canister scrubs out that poisonous carbon dioxide. Well, now my loop volume has diminished. So that's what this is showing, is you can see how much at the start of the video my counter lung expands when I breathe out and breathe it into the counter lung. And when I breathe back in, at the start of the video, it's not going to a negative. It's not completely empty, because I'm past minimal loop volume.
This is a very long time already. So how many minutes already have we been in it? 5. 5 minutes? I mean, how often do you suggest people look at their PPO2?
Well, you remember from class that I suggest every 30 seconds to a minute.
Right.
And most of the books say never more than 4 minutes. And I mean, the only time I think I've ever gone past 4 minutes was when I was in Zero Viz at that double fatality and double body recovery in the Dominican Republic.
But you would have added Dill, right? I mean, in that situation. So.
Well, at that situation, I was so confident in what my rig was doing at 7, 8, 9 minutes. I would look. Now, my loop volume hadn't diminished, so I knew I was still getting oxygen. And when I could see it, I'd have to bang my computer on my face. But when I could see it, I could see that I was still above a 1. So,
and by the way, Ed teaches you need to know your unit. How many breaths, if you're at your set point, is it going to take you to get down to a certain level? Like, you should know that, and you teach that.
Did you lose something, Woody? It looks like you dropped something. You were looking like on the bottom.
Oh, really? That was probably me.
He's bored because I'm just swimming in place like I'm on a treadmill.
That's dropped his wallet?
No, I think I got water, a little bit of water.
I don't know if you guys noticed, but it's quite noticeable, the change on the counter lung. How much
the counter lung.
more collapse there are when Ed breathes in. Look at that.
Yeah.
And you'll see the negative hold because I'm like, oh, and I've got it to suck completely dry.
It's going to get even more. Like when I go in the back of him and I point to it, that thing is totally collapsed.
And what do we got for a PO2 at this point? I think we're still over 1.
You just crossed over 1.
Just about 1. Yeah.
Under 1. That's what I meant.
And you're probably, what, 7 minutes or so?
0.98, 0.94, 0.99.
So we're still at almost pure oxygen.
Yes.
At the surface. So,
remember, everybody, 0.21 is what we're breathing right now, and he's at I don't know, 9.5. I can't see.
9.8, 9.6, 9.7.
And most people feel the effects of hypoxia at 0.16 or less. I've actually seen 0.12, and I had pretty much very little brain function, but I knew something was wrong. So, you know, your body is going to tell you that something is not right here. But it's getting...
Oh, look at those counter lungs there, collapsing.
It's getting that's what I'm showing here. We actually had some cards made up and I forgot them at the surface. So I'm saying it's really, really getting hard for me to breathe. And at this point, my lungs really aren't...
I'm feeling like there's nothing in there. Barely anything in there.
Yep.
Yeah, at this point, it's getting extremely difficult to breathe.
Yeah, 0.92 still.
And that's why I was touching him. I'm like, how are you breathing?
Yep, so you shut it off, or the whole thing started when it was at the 14-minute on the dive. Like it just clicked into 14, and I can see on the computer we're at 22, I think it says?
Correct.
23, something like that?
It was 22, yeah.
Yeah, so 8 minutes so far.
8 minutes, and what's the PPO2 about?
It's like 0.9, 0.8 something.
So he's gonna have to add dill to breathe. Way before it's anywhere near.
I think that's what Ed said. Like when he look up, he look at me and he pointed at his mouth saying, I want to add gas so bad because it's getting hard to breathe. But he didn't.
But at this point, we're this far in. I mean, look at how many times a minute you breathe.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of breaths have gone on here, and I'm swimming against high flow, and it's still almost 5 times the amount of oxygen we're breathing right now.
Yeah.
So we're not even close to a dangerous level. This was just to show with your ADV, your automatic demand valve shut off, it's physically impossible to even get in the ballpark of hypoxic without adding something. And you never intentionally add something without checking your PO2.
Right.
You would never add dill or oxygen without checking your PO2.
You used it 10 minutes.
You're like, it's hard to breathe. And no diver would ever let it get that hard to breathe. You're forcing yourself to barely be able to breathe.
So if this person had their ADV on, now keep in mind your ADV fires from right here.
Yeah.
Your ear's right here. So we're talking less than a foot away from your ear.
Dead
Rebreather
quiet
is silent. There's no way you can't not hear that fire. Plus you have to draw a negative on it.
That's right, to fire.
To get it to fire. So you have to feel that negative, then you feel it fire, you hear it fire, it's added a gas.
Oh, you're dead.
Yep, that's when I died. And this is when I tell them, just kidding. It's getting very difficult at this point to breathe.
And you're at 0.72. Way, three times, more than 3 times what we are breathing right here, let alone near hypoxia.
And over 6 times what we need to sustain breath.
So,
Right.
Wow, and that's incredible. Yeah, the lungs are just gone.
And this is when I say I'm going to go ahead and add.
And breathe.
And now I can get a full lung full. Because I was actually starting to produce more CO2 just because I had nothing to breathe.
So 11 minutes you went. 11 minutes you went without adding any O2, any dill, and you can see that the PO2 was on the 7s, like 0.75, 0.7 something. So very, very far away.
Yeah. So if we actually did the math of that victim had like a 0.42, 0.44, 0.45 dill PPO2. So a pure dill flush would have given him, and that's still almost 3 times what you need to survive.
Right.
So that means that long before this, he would have had to have added some gas, which would have dropped the PO2. Then after minutes more, and still not checking, it would have dropped some more when some more of the 0.4.
Right.
At a certain point, you're going to get below what that PO2 gas is. So now you're at, say, 0.38 and you need gas, and that's going to raise it.
Yeah.
And then you're going to breathe it down, and it's going to raise it, and you're going to breathe it down, and it's going to raise it. So I'm guessing that on the very soonest, I think he was reported at a 0.4 something is what his computer said when the oxygen was either purposely or accidentally shut off. At the very lowest end, I'm guessing would have been over 20 minutes.
Wow.
At the upper end, 25 to 29, 30 minutes.
Wow.
And nobody doesn't check their PO2
For 30 minutes.
for 30 minutes.
And the other point is he's got total clarity. There's nothing close to hypoxia at that point. So it's not like he would have been confused, like from hypoxia, should I turn the O2 on? You have more clarity than we have right now. So it couldn't be that.
And there was 50% helium in the mix, so he should have, even at 110 feet, should have had a He's got a very high END, so he should have been very clear thinking.
He was probably equivalent to 40 or 50 feet.
But remember, this was not about the fatality.
Yeah.
This was only about the people saying the nonsense of a shutoff is going to kill you. That's simply nonsense.
Yeah.
If you not checking your PO2 can kill you. So that's why
it's rule number 1 of free breather diving. Always know your PO2.
Exactly.
And another big point that we were discussing before is, let's say he didn't have a shutoff valve. He turned his O2 off for a reason.
Right.
Whatever the reason is, whatever. He turned it off consciously. He would have had, if he didn't have a shutoff valve, he would have had to reach back and turn his O2 off. Either way, he would have turned his O2 off. So it's not the shutoff valve.
And getting to it, it's multiple turns.
Way harder.
Versus off.
So
and when you need it, on. Versus multiple turns, on.
That's a really important point. I mean,
and
you're going to shut it off either way.
I've been in restrictions where I can't reach that. And this, I mean, nobody's ever going to take mine away from me. I guarantee you that.
Right. So Ed, one of the things people are saying also that I notice is that they don't want to add that shutoff valve because it adds a point of failure.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Come up.
Well, everything in scuba diving has O-rings. So are O-rings a failure point? Absolutely. Here's the inside of a shutoff. You can see there's 4 O-rings and a shaft. Now, if you do buy the cheap ones, there's a certain company that sells some that are very, very inexpensive. We've actually seen the plastic part blow up, but in a Omni swivel, a good US made one, I've got thousands of hours on these things. I've never seen a failure. The worst thing that's gonna happen is that O-ring's going to start to bubble, and bubble, bubble, bubble. So what? If it fails completely, it'll fail open, as if you don't have one on, and you might leak a small amount of gas. So if are O-rings a failure point? Absolutely they are. But if O-ring failure is a problem for you, you should probably quit scuba diving. There's around 11, 12 O-rings in a first and second stage, and they're the same exact Viton O-rings that you see in there. So if that's a failure, that is a failure point. So if that's a problem for you, probably should stop diving. But the point is, I'm not trying to sell anyone on a shutoff. I don't care.
Yeah.
If you don't like tires on your car, if you'd rather walk to the store, I don't care. Walk to the store, pick up your groceries.
Right.
If you don't want a shutoff, don't have one. If you don't want a VOV or you don't want a nerd or a heads up, don't have one. If you want one, have one.
Right.
Whatever you know, like in my class, you remember I said rebreather diving is about 80% mental. So what gives you that warm fuzzy? If having a nerd and a heads-up display and a computer and a backup computer on this hand and 3 pockets in your pocket, if that makes you feel more comfortable, it makes you feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
I always say, never look at your computer for information, ever. A diver that looks at their computer for information is just a fatality that hasn't picked a location yet. You should always expect to see. I know what mine's going to say before I look. I'm only looking for confirmation. Mine should be at a 1.2. Yep. So you should always know what it is, and you're looking just to confirm it. Trust but verify. So I'm not trying to sell anybody on you should have a shut off. I don't care. I'm saying I want one. My opinion is they're safe. If you still, after seeing this, don't believe they're safe, don't have one. I don't care. But don't tell me what I can and cannot have. And please stop the nonsense of that's going to kill you. I mean, that's just nonsense. You know better than that.
All right.
It's hard to argue with wow.
Great
that
experiment.
is a really incredible experiment about this subject.
And we talked about having a live time where people could ask questions.
We'll want that.
And then I'll answer them immediately right there live. I have no problem with that. And if even this doesn't prove it, what we can do is do another dive just like this. I'll get a dill mix that will be a 0.4, and we'll take it all the way down. I would be fully comfortable taking it down to a 0.16. I'm not going to go any lower because I know past that I can go hypoxic and I'm not going to endanger my life.
Right.
But you will see, if this blew you away at how long it took just to get to 0.7, wait till you see the next video.
To get to 0.16.
They get to 0.16.
Grab some popcorn.
You're gonna need a big bucket of popcorn because it's gonna take a while.
It's gonna take a while.
And on that live session, I think we're going to get a lot of questions because I know this was a very technical talk. So Ed already told us he would be happy to, in the live session, explain exactly what we're talking about if you have questions when you watch this. And I think that'll be really helpful for the non-divers because it's a cool subject.
Right, and just remember that PO2 that you're seeing on the screen is just percent oxygen. So 1.00 is 100%, or pure oxygen, as if I was breathing a pure oxygen bottle right now. If you see, if I held my computer up right here, right now, it would say 0.21 because that's what we're breathing, 0.21, 21% oxygen. So it's real simple. The only reason we can get above 1 is because of the pressure from the water pressure.
That's right.
Fantastic. Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for watching. Let's link another video with Ed so you can keep the binge going. But other than that, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, everyone.
And if you have any questions, write them down, and we're going to do that live session soon, and you can drill away, and I can't wait to hear what you got.
Let's do it.
Great.